watch Dallas. We'll see.
Welcome back to another episode of Redzone In the Lab podcast. It is me, Deuce. What is going on today? We got a special edition. We need to find out who we got in Laremy Tunsil. So for that information, we can't find it. So I had to go down south to bring in Texas Jacob. Texas Jacob, how you doing? So glad you could join us today, buddy.
I'm doing well. Excited to talk about this Laremy Tunsil move. You know, a shocking move for I think everyone in the Texans fan base, and I'm sure for Washington as well. Definitely a fun one because like we'll get into. Very good player, but there are reasons the Texans moved off, and I think the return was pretty fair.
Before we get in Laremy Tunsil, every time I talk to a Texans fan, a reporter, player, I have to bring this up, right? When I started really getting into to football and learning about other players in other cities, like I knew, my players, with the then Redskins. My first player I was admired by was David Carr. I was admired by David Carr, and I think it has something to do with the expansion and all of that. Wow, I was so intrigued about that whole process. So what happened?
Man, they could not protect that guy. It was, I guess now what's funny is you see Texans fans when they trade away linemen, and after last year, man, people are worried about the same thing happening with Stroud. So you're seeing like the revolving door of people because like honestly, I didn't watch football back then. I'm younger. Like I was not even born until 2006, so I'm like 18. So I really got into it like 2014, where the Texans went 2-14. So we were brutal when I got into it, but obviously I've gone back and watched, but Carr was just, it's tough for a quarterback, no matter how talented you are. You can't be protected. Like we talked about, the Texans saw it with Stroud last season, where really didn't regress as a quarterback, and he played well in the playoffs, but you can't protect your guy consistently, and it's just it becomes a mental issue.
And that's how we're here, right? Because
exactly.
With him, he did have a left tackle, right? They drafted a left tackle with him. I can't think of his name.
Yeah,
I just had
Baselli.
Yep. He had a left tackle, right?
Yep.
One of the best, one of the greatest,
never played.
Right? Never played, right? And then what ended up happening with Baselli, right? He ended up. It was yeah, go ahead.
Some knee injury, right? Wasn't it some type of injury that he had? Never played for the Texans, and then now he's like the GM in Jacksonville or whatever he is, like assistant GM. So there you go. I mean, I think we might have had a double agent there. I don't think that was not the plan.
So, and that brings us here, right? That brings us here. That brings us to when you had a left tackle with Deshaun Watson.
Yep.
Right? With Deshaun Watson, who was the left tackle? I can't think of his name.
Well, so originally 2017 was Dwayne Brown, and then he got traded. Yep.
And that's why I want to stop it, because he was a pretty good left tackle. Dwayne Brown was a pretty good left tackle.
He was.
He was a pretty good left tackle. And the reasons for that was what? Locker room stuff.
Yeah,
right.
And money.
Culture stuff. Yeah. And money. Right. Not wanting to pay him. Right. Is that the gist of what you got with Dwayne Brown?
Yeah. I mean, really what I remember is, so he held out to start the season. He didn't play the first 4 weeks. And then I remember, I don't remember exactly what week it was, but the Texans went into Seattle, and they ended up losing this game, but it was it was a complete shootout. Like Watson threw, I think, 5 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. It was a total shootout. But Brown came back for this game, played pretty well. But he held out because he wanted the new contract, because at this point he was playing on non-guaranteed money, if I'm not mistaken, and wanted to renew his deal. But O'Brien at this point was pretty much the GM. Rick Smith was technically the GM, but I want to say at this point he was on leave because his wife or something had health problems. So it was pretty much O'Brien running the show at this point. So O'Brien was not a big fan of him, like you talked about culture issues at this point. didn't really want to pay Dwayne Brown, so they ended up trading Dwayne Brown for a return that wasn't that great. And then we'll talk about in 2 years. In 2018, the line was so bad when Watson got healthy that they were actually a very good team, but gave up a ton of sacks. So they ended up being forced to go make a move for Laremy Tunsil that was an insane amount of capital. You know, multiple firsts for him, and then had to extend him. So it ended up just not working out.
And I think this is one of the best segues of all time. And now we get to Laremy Tunsil.
Yep.
Right, we get to Laremy Tunsil. He has 2 years left on his deal. You have a ton of guys that you're going to have to pay next year. You got Will Anderson, you got CJ,
Yes.
you got the
Yeah.
cornerback, and a few other players. He's also 30, 31, right?
Yeah.
Let's. Oh, hold on. Wait a second. This is free agency. Hold on 1 second. I saw.
Yeah, no, I get it. I was doing one yesterday as well, and I kept checking. We got so
Okay,
I
there
get
you
it
go.
for
All
sure.
right. I saw something about Aaron Rodgers. Okay, all right. That's false alarm.
Yeah.
So let's talk about Tunsil before we get into all of the other whys and he's gone and
Sounds
why he's
good.
not there
Yep.
anymore. How is he in the run game?
So I think what you will see from the general consensus of the Texans fans is that he's not a good run blocker. I disagree with that. I do think he's a good run blocker, especially when you run a lot of zone blocking. He's very athletic for a tackle. Like he can get out wide, go make a block on a linebacker if he's pulling or whatever, anything like that. The only issue with him in the run game is he will take plays off. There are plays where he will just kind of stand there and watch, which is kind of what the give and take with him. It happens sometimes, but you just kind of sacrifice it because he's such a good pass protector. Jake has to worry about the left tackle spot for the next however many years he's there. So good run blocker when he wants to be. Like I remember a clip from the Jacksonville game earlier this year where he took out kind of a play off and a guy kind of took a cheap shot on him, and the next play he went out and just pancaked this guy. Like it's all an effort thing with him. So if maybe the situation will motivate him a little bit more to go out there and run block. And I think when you get to the playoffs, he kind of takes it up a notch. Like he just takes plays off regular season. So that's kind of what you deal with the guy. But good run blocker as a whole.
Yeah. And has that been the case since he's been there, or is that this last year, this last couple years?
He's always kind of been a guy that would take some plays off, and I'm sure we'll get into kind of the fit and the culture things after. He's always kind of been a guy that just I think he relies a lot on his physical tools. He's not gonna outwork anybody necessarily,
Gotcha.
but he's so physically talented that he's just better than 95% of the people on the field. So he's able to make it work.
Yeah. You talked about the zone scheme.
Yep.
We have a little bit of that. I mean, it's kind of mixed in. Is he? And I know he's crazy athletic. But we do a lot of pulls, and we do a lot of play side pulls. We do a lot of
Yep.
off play pulls with the furthest tackle and different things like that. Is he a move tackle in that sense?
He absolutely can be. He can do both. I think he can, he can stay, he can be still. He can also move. I like him on the move a lot because he is a super athletic guy. What the Texans would do a lot was they would, fake like a stretch one way and then throw a screen out the other way. And Tunsil was able to get out there. The one that's kind of memorable is the Dallas game where the first play he was downfield on the play. So it got called back, but they take it 75 yards because he was able to. And a lot of this is just bad schematics from the Texans last year. Like
Yeah.
that's why Bobby Slowick is not the coordinator anymore. They did a
Oh,
poor job executing
man.
these.
Oof.
But the idea is correct. Like we have an athletic tackle so he can get out there. The problem was, like I said, schematically, it just didn't work. They did a poor job executing it. But that is the type of stuff that you can do with Laremy Tunsil, which you can't do with a lot of tackles. A lot of tackles are not able to get out there and block that type of stuff. So now especially with a guy like Debo, who the Commanders have acquired, you're going to want to throw a lot of screens and stuff to him. So having a guy like Laremy Tunsil who can pull out there and go make that block is very nice.
So the pass game, like I don't think anyone has any issues whatsoever
Not at all.
with the
Not at
pass
all.
game. But what makes him so great?
He's amazing against speed. He will not get beat by speed. I think even last year you saw the bull rush kind of caught up to a little bit. Like he wasn't as good last year as he had been, maybe 2022. Still one of the best pass protectors in the NFL, like no doubt about it. But he did struggle a little bit against bull rushes sometimes. But against speed, he's unbelievable. He will not get beat by a speed rusher. He's just too quick. His feet are too nimble. He moves so smooth. Um, Commanders fans will have zero issues with him in the pass game. I mean, he is unbelievable at that in that sense. The one thing that I think from last season that you kind of saw in the pass game was he was part of the issue when it came to not picking up stunts, but that was the entire Texans offensive line. So I really will say I don't think that was a Laremy Tunsil issue. I think it was a coaching and schematic thing. So I wouldn't worry too much about Laremy Tunsil having that issue. It never was an issue for him when he was in Houston for like 6 years until this season. So and then he played next to Kenyon
Communication
Green,
too,
who
probably.
Kenyon Green's and when I know in Philly now, who y'all in Philly don't get along, but Kenyon Green is brutal. Like he is brutal. He may end up being decent at Philly because Philly somehow does this with every lineman. It feels like, but one of the worst guards I've ever watched play football. He was terrible. So Laremy Tunsil in the past game is top 3 in the NFL at tackle. It's not even really debatable to me.
And I love his hands. I haven't done a lot
Yeah,
of tape outside of
great hands, great
I
feet.
watch him, I know who he is, but as far as him coming to us, it's just happened. We've been rocking and rolling with free agency. So, but one thing I noticed in the small dive I did in him is his hands. I mean, he's like a black belt out there. It's amazing.
His hands, his feet, and just technically, he's so sound. He doesn't make technical mistakes very often, which is, like I said, the only thing that he will make a mistake on is more mental stuff. Like physically, he dominates pretty much everybody on the football field. You want to go back. I'll give you a game to watch if you want to be hyped about Laremy Tunsil. Go back to watch 2023 wild card against the Browns. In this game, he's playing on a bad knee as well. He had surgery on this after the season, but Myles Garrett, I think, had one pressure the entire game, was completely locked up this whole game. And one of the early touchdowns is the play I'm talking about where the Texans fake a stretch, throw the screen out to Nico. He gets a block from Tunsil, touchdown. That type of stuff, it happened consistently for the Texans when they were able to execute the play schematically. And that type of stuff is super fun, And like I said, locking up Myles Garrett, we're seeing now he's making $40 million a year. That dude's pretty good. So you're able to take that guy out of the game completely. That's such a huge thing. And like we talk about for y'all play Philly twice a year, Dallas twice a year, who has Micah Parsons. It's a big deal. Micah Parsons is another one. When we played Dallas, did nothing against Laremy Tunsil. Was completely locked up that game.
This year. That was this year. I watched that game.
We played him twice because we played him a couple years ago as well in 2022, where Micah Parsons did nothing as well. Actually, Parsons has gone on the record to say Tunsil's the best tackle in the NFL. So,
I can't wait.
Physically, Tunsil actually will play better against better talent, which I think it's a mental thing for him. He's kind of like more motivated to play against these better edge rushers, which when you get to the playoffs in the division y'all are in, that's a good thing.
Gonna be a lot. I actually like that you said that because like we face those guys almost every week. So for sure. Let's get into the relationships part of it. How is his relationship with CJ Stroud?
Stroud, from what I know, loved him. I loved him. They got along very well. They would hang out in off seasons as well. Tunsil's a guy that I think people in the general consensus of the team love the guy. Whether that's a good thing or not, because he is kind of a lazy guy, that is kind of up for your judgment. I think that's part of the reason why the Texans did make the move they did, because they don't want that kind of leading the offensive line room. But the same sense, it's not his job to lead the offensive line room. That would be the offensive line coach's job, which was a disaster last year as well. So, but Stroud had, I'm sure Jaden will love him too. He's a very down to earth guy. Like even for me, I've got to meet him at training camps and stuff. Very, very nice guy. Not, like I said, not the most outspoken guy or anything like that. He won't necessarily speak up. He's more just gonna lead by example. But when you watch him on tape, there's a good reason why he leads by example. He's a very good tackle. So,
what about with his other teammate, like the offensive line? I mean, Kenyon Green. I mean, I know he's having a very down NFL career. I mean, somebody like Laremy Tunsil, like, is he, like, you hear any reports from him kind of encouraging him? And how is he with the other? Was he kind of standoffish? I mean, some guys just like that.
Yeah. I think he's more so. From what I know, he took Titus Howard. This is kind of when the Texans traded for him
Yeah.
back in 2019. He did take Titus Howard pretty much under his ranks, who is the other tackle for the Texans, probably going to play left tackle next season with Tunsil gone now. And Titus Howard's a good player. He definitely helped Titus Howard out. But I do think it reached a point with Titus Howard that he kind of took on this laziness and stuff that Tunsil had. And
Oh
when
gosh.
you're not as good as Tunsil, you can't really do that.
Right.
He kind of
Oh,
put on some weight over this last season, and then this season you did see some where like he would not kind of take some plays off in the run game, and he would also just not hand fight with people. He would kind of just he'd get one moved, and then he was kind of gone. He's still a good tackle, but it is kind of one of those things where when you're not Tunsil, you can't do the things that Tunsil
right.
does on the run game and stuff like that. So, like I said, that's part of the reason why the Texans moved off of him. They don't want that for a lot of the younger linemen. I'm sure that they're going to draft. But from what I know, that the Commanders have kind of an established offensive line at most of the spots, so it probably isn't too much of an issue. Um, but I do think that is a real thing. From what I know about Kenyon, I don't really know anything about what they did with Kenyon. Kenyon was Kenyon was a weird situation because for a rookie year, he wasn't really able to practice in training camp because he had his injury. So he kind of was thrown into the role pretty quick in the season. It was a disaster. And then he was hurt last season as well. And this season he got a shot and was terrible. But from what I know, the players like Laremy Tunsil.
Yeah.
They all liked him. He was a very, like you said, he might have been a little standoffish from what you can kind of get. He wasn't necessarily going to like speak up in a meeting where like we were having a bad season for an offensive line group. He wasn't necessarily going to be the guy to like be the be the calming voice. That's not who he is. But he is a guy that players enjoy playing with.
Um, and what about community? Our culture here is really big on the community. Fans and training camp. Like we still have all of our fans and coming to training camp and different things like that. How is his interactions with things outside of football, as far as like the community, training camp, fans, different things like that?
I mean, from everything I've seen with the guy, he's a super nice guy. Like I said, I've got to meet him and talk to him for a little bit at training camps before. Like super down to earth guy. And this is back when the Texans were not very good. This is like we're winning 4 games a
Yeah.
season, so I'm one of very few people that would go. But I'm here. Very nice guy. And just got to just talk with him for a little bit. Like I said, very down to earth guy. He's not going to be this guy because I'm sure Washington's going to make him the highest paid tackler, one of the highest paid tackles now. He's not going to be this guy that is, has an ego about it. He's very down to earth, and I think this is why players like him as well. He's not too high, he's not too low. He's right there. He's very not talkative, but he's very open to discussion with people. And I'm sure Washington fans will love the guy because he is a fun guy.
Yeah, because you like we're hearing a lot of reports, and at once we're done, I just kind of prep you now, just to kind of give like of everything that we're hearing about him being selfish, about him being
Okay. Yeah.
lazy, all those different types of things, just to kind of sum it up for us, about how you actually see it from your point of view. But before we get there, how was his relationship with D'Amico when D'Amico was hired?
This is an interesting one because I'm not really sure what this relationship was. I thought so. He's got voted team captain this season. He's been a team captain since 2022. So, like I said, the players did like him a lot. But D'Amico is an interesting one because I will say, like during this combine, he was very insistent on the Texans needing kind of these gritty linemen that just worked harder than everybody else. And the first guy to make the move was Laremy Tunsil. So was it a shot at him? I don't really know the situation there, but I do think to make a move like the Texans made, where you trade away your star left tackle, the head coach has to kind of be on board with it at least. So I think they probably had a good relationship. I'm sure they got along, but maybe from the football side of it, he was kind of tired of maybe just not leading by example. They kind of want a guy to lead by example, and that's why even if you want to go to the Texans side of it, they signed Lincoln Tomlinson the other day, who maybe won't have to start, but D'Amico was with him in San Francisco and is kind of a guy that they know can be a good locker room voice. The guy that's been around. So that's probably where the relationship maybe soured a little bit. But I don't think D'Amico Ryan's ever had issues with Laremy Tunsil at all, especially from a person standpoint.
I mean, even with that, like everyone is not a leader.
Absolutely.
Like I
Yeah,
mean, even if
absolutely.
you're the best player, like everyone is not a leader, everyone is not
Everyone's
a
different.
rah-rah guy.
Yeah,
Everyone is
absolutely.
different. Do you think this is more on the coaches not being able to like lead outside of him or lead like do you think they expected too
That is
much
my
from him?
opinion. Yeah. That's my stance on it. That's one of my stance since even before the Tunsil trade was that the offensive line was a lot of coaching issues. And even the Texans, when they hired a new offensive line coach, it basically came out that three guys were trying to lead the offensive line room at once. They had their line coach who wasn't really doing anything, and then two assistant line coaches that were trying to lead the group, and it was a disaster. You can't expect Laremy Tunsil to step into this meeting and just like he's not the guy to do that. And if you want a guy to do that, then you have to replace him clearly. But I don't think that was ever, his. That's not who he is from a personality standpoint. So expecting him to do that is pretty unfair. And like we talked about, the line was a lot of coaching issues. They couldn't block a stunt all season long. Like if you're going to go watch Tunsil from this season, you're going to watch the offensive line and just be shocked with how poorly that group played because it was a disaster. Tunsil was still a very good player. I would have very little concerns about the leadership that people have talked about for the Commanders. I wouldn't worry about that.
Yeah, I mean, because we have guys, right?
Yeah.
We have seasoned guys. We have Wiley, we have Tyler Biotish,
Mhm.
Sam Cosme,
Yep.
we got OG Bobby Johnson leading them, Anthony. So we have a lot of that, right? We don't
For
need
sure.
him to
Yeah.
come in
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
take this guy under his
Absolutely.
wing and do any of things like because sometimes like you
Yeah.
expect too much from
Yeah. And I
superstars.
think I agree with that. Yeah.
I
I
mean,
think they did.
what I think was Barkley. I don't want to be a role model. I think that's what Barkley said.
Yeah.
Charles
Yeah.
Barkley. Yeah.
I mean, and Tunsil's not the type of guy to be this vocal leader, and he's just and I think it was probably the right time to part sides for both of these teams because like you talked about earlier, the Texans do have to pay a ton of guys coming up here, and he was probably the odd guy out. Whether that's fair or she should have been him, he just was because I think they want to pay Daniil Hunter as well, and even though he's older, I think they'd
Yeah, I
like to
forgot
keep him
about
around
him
after
too.
a productive season. Jalen Petre's another guy that he had injury things last year, but a guy that I think they want to keep around as their nickel. Um, you know, Christian Harris could, if he plays well, could get an extension. Henry To'oTo'o, Kamari Lassiter, and Kalen Bullock played really well
Yeah,
this season, and they're more down the
that's
line, but they're still a team, or they're still guys that could, earn a lot of money. And Derek Stingley this offseason is going to probably be the highest paid corner. So they just have a ton of guys that they have to pay, and they have decent tackles still. Titus Howard's a good tackle. Blake Fisher did some solid things near
I
the end of
liked him
last
at
year.
Michigan. Yeah.
I did. Yeah, I did too. I think he's a good player. He's kind of a younger guy. He's more of a project, but I do think he has a lot of good tools to work this out. He's going to probably play right tackle next season. So I think it made sense for both parties. That's kind of been my stance for the whole thing. I think for Washington, you elevate your offensive line, you get a top tackle, you can easily, be a contender this season. And for the Texans, you're able to move off the guy at the right time. You get a lot of draft capital for him, and you're able to rebuild your line.
I do want to kind of pivot a little bit, and talk about like the contract part of it. Was there any sense that Tunsil wanted to move on, or was he also surprised?
I think from what it sounded like, he was surprised as well. I think he came. So from what it seemed like from different reporters around Houston was that he wanted an extension and approached them about the extension, and they didn't really want to give him an extension. So they
Okay,
started kind of
gotcha.
shopping him around.
Yeah,
Um, and from what Ian Rappaport said, there wasn't a ton of like teams that were super interested in Tunsil. There was probably a couple. Washington was definitely the most aggressive towards him because I know Washington was in on like Stanley before
yep,
he went back to Baltimore. So they
yep.
were in the market for a tackle, and Tunsil was the guy. I mean, Tunsil was probably the best option out of all of them. So you got the best one. You paid premium price for it, but you got the best player on the market. So, but yeah, no, I do think Tunsil wanted to stay in Houston. I think he was blindsided by it. A lot of the players were blindsided by it. They didn't see this coming. But I do understand from the Texan standpoint of after you play or after you have such a poor season from an offensive line standpoint, it doesn't make really a lot of sense to pay this guy $30+ million. It just wouldn't make it, you want to rebuild your line at this point with some younger talent. So adding some capital makes sense.
When it comes to the trade, the compensation on both parts, for me,
Yep.
I'm fine with it. I mean, I think this is a premium
Yeah.
left tackle. Elite left tackles like him have shown to play within their 30s, right? So I'm okay,
absolutely.
right? So as far as the Texan side, I mean, they get 4 picks, they get a 3 and a 7 this year, 2 and a 4 next year. Do you think that was fair compensation for them? Like, how do you think it fares out?
I think it's pretty fair for both sides, honestly. I think for the Texans, the value basically equates to like a late first round pick, which I think for
Mhm.
a guy that is past 30, like you said, he can, like tackles will play into the 30s, but he is on the older side of 30 and then or older side of his career. And then you look at the returns for a lot of these guys that teams don't really like giving up first round picks at all. They'd rather give up the value of a first and with more picks than just give up a first because you get the fifth year option and other stuff like that. But I think it's pretty fair. The Texans now have a lot of capital to come make moves. And, for a guy that's going to get extended here pretty soon, that is a big part of, why teams necessarily wouldn't make the trade because they don't want to pay. You have to give up the capital while also paying him big time money. So for the Texans to net pretty much a first round pick out of it, value wise, I think that's good value.
And my guy Cuddy in the chat reminded me, because like I don't think there's an issue like the penalties, right? I think
Oh yeah, yeah.
we got 9 false start penalties, something like that. I think, and he got the
Yeah,
rest was 40. He had what,
he
19,
had
16, something like that.
like 18 or 19, yeah. And
Yeah.
so really what I can tell you about the penalties is that they were cleaned up after week 3. He had 12 penalties in the first 3 weeks. The
Wait a
Minnesota
minute.
game was
Wait a minute.
just he had 12 or something like that, 11, 12 in the first 3 weeks. Minnesota, he had like 6, and Chicago, he had a couple. It was the first couple weeks were brutal penalty wise, and then it was cleaned up.
So
But
that's
what I can tell you about the
yeah. Go
yeah,
ahead. Go ahead.
it was cleaned up. It was cleaned up pretty well. He finished the season well. I will say I think the reason that the Texans fans were so frustrated about this and the penalties early on was because he didn't practice a lot throughout training camp. And so he comes in and he wasn't necessarily prepared. And then he was trying to he talked about how the line had to play better as a group, but which is absolutely true, but you were the only one from the group that wasn't practicing in training camp. So it's kind of, it's kind of one of those things where it tilts the line of like, is that lazy? Is it just because he did have an injury thing? But from what, Texans people have talked about for a while, this is probably one of those culture things that people talk about is he was back in like 2021, 2022, when the Texans weren't very good, they would pay him to come out and actually practice. He wouldn't come to practice unless he was paid more money to attend these training camps and do stuff like that. So he's motivated by money. That is the big thing. If you give him a certain amount of money, he's going to go do whatever you want him to do. But that is one of the things where you talk about the culture stuff. That's one of those where it kind of sticks out as a sore thumb issue. But the penalties, man, you can put up the penalties because he doesn't hold. It's pretty much all pre-snap stuff. And
That,
he's
that,
such a
that,
good player.
that's what I'm gonna ask, especially the false starts. Is that more of the tackle NFL tackle thing when they trying to get that extra
Yeah.
edge, or is it more like mental snap count?
No, he just tries to cheat it. He just
Yeah,
tries
so
to
I
cheat.
think that really
Yeah.
depends on the crew that week, like what they're
It
gonna let
absolutely
you do.
does.
Yeah.
Absolutely. The Minnesota crew got him on like 4 illegal formation penalties where he lined up. That whole game was stupid because he lined up at the same spot every time and they would only call it like a crucial third down. So it
That's
didn't make any
insane.
sense. But and then the false starts, he just cheats. He will cheat. And then some of these times the Texans had bad like communication on the line, so that he would think it was going to get snapped. And then like some people would move, some wouldn't. So it was like just a disaster as a whole. But for the most part, his penalties were him just trying to cheat.
Yeah.
Because the good example is week 18 when Stroud came out of the game and they put Mills in the game. So people would so he had 2 back-to-back false starts, and people would try to say it was a snap count issue. That's not a snap count issue because nobody else was going early. It was just him going early, where he's just trying to cheat it and get a head start. But you kind of put up with it because he also gets a lot of these where he does get a head start, and you're not beating him with his feet and his hands off of a quick start like that. You're not going to get past him.
Just for the last, just give us like, what do you say to the people? And we kind of talked about this earlier. That say, he's a bad culture guy. He's lazy. He doesn't care. He doesn't encourage his teammates. Just kind of paint him as a bad person. What do you say to those people?
I don't think that's the reality of the situation. I think I do think there's certain laziness traits or certain things that, but for the Texans offensive line last season, there was a lot of just mental mistakes, and he was part of this, but just a ton of mental mistakes and stuff like that. I don't think Laremy Tunsil is a bad locker room player at all. I think the players will absolutely love him. He's a very down to earth guy. He's a very chill guy, and very easy guy to connect with. I'm sure the players will love him. I'm sure that the line coaches will like him because he's a very technically sound guy. He's a guy that you can watch and learn a ton from. I know Brandon Coleman. I know maybe he won't start next season, but he's a younger tackle that
I
maybe
think
he
they
can
move
move
him to
inside.
guard.
Yeah, move him inside. Yeah, and the guy that Tunsil could kind of take under his wing and teach him some things, and that would help him a ton. I'm sure Tunsil's such a technically sound guy that he could teach these guys that just by showing him the film of what he's done for however long he's done it. I wouldn't have issues. I wouldn't be concerned about Laremy Tunsil, the culture fit, as long as you have other guys that can lead by example, and the line coach leads by example. That was the issue the Texans ran into last season. Was he was the best player, he was the highest paid player, he was the only real veteran on that line. So when it all went to crap, when the line coaches were failing, they wanted him to speak up, I guess, and that's just not who he is. So, and for y'all, you'll have an experienced center. That's a big part of it. But with I forget the old Cowboys center.
Yeah, Tyler
Uh,
Biadasz.
yeah, great center, very good player. But he's a guy that could speak up in that situation. And the center is a lot of times the guy on the line that's kind of the architect of pass protection, stuff like that. So he would kind of be the guy that could speak up in the situation instead of Tunsil or Cosby, like we talked about. Cosby's one of the better guards in football, I think. So he could speak up in the situation, and then the line as a whole was much better than expected last season. I know y'all hired that the Giants offensive line coach Bobby Johnson. Yep. He stepped in and did a really good job. So I would not worry about the whole culture thing too much. Like I said, he will take some plays off in the run game, but when you need him to be like when you need him to step up playoffs or big games, he'll play.
That guy. That's what I love. That's what I'm excited about. But thank you so much, Jacob, for joining us. Please drop your handles.
Thanks for having me on.
No problem. Where anyone can reach out to you. Some people might ask some more questions. Let everyone know where they can find you.
Yeah, of course. So my Twitter, or X, I guess now, I still refer to it as Twitter, but is Texans Jacob. And I do my podcast. It's called the Texans Pro. We go through kind of weekly, talk about Texans film. It's on Clutch City Entertainment. It's in my bio. The Twitter is linked in my bio. I also do content for the Sleeper. So if you're a Texans fan or a Commanders fan, the Commanders have their Sleeper. So you can go ahead and follow that. But yeah, Texans Jacob. I post a lot of Texans stuff. Big Noah Brown fan. I know he's a Commander this year, so that's one of your guys. But like I said, I appreciate y'all having me on. If y'all got any questions about Laremy Tunsil or y'all want to know anything, y'all can always DM me or just like I said, tag me, and I'll be more than happy to answer questions about him.
Thank you so much, Jacob, and enjoy your mini vacay.
I appreciate it.
All right, take care, buddy. All right, no problem. Thank Jacob so much for joining us. Next, right after this, we're gonna have Jeff Nowak who's be joining us, Saints sideline reporter, to talk about Will Harris. I keep saying Will Smith, so I gotta say Will Harris 3 or 4 times. But right after this, we're gonna have Jeff up.
Watch Dallas. We'll see.
Jeff, how you doing? Saints sideline reporter. How you doing today, buddy?
I'm doing good, man. How are you?
I'm doing good. Hanging in there, hanging tight. Will Harris. Like I said, I gotta keep saying Will Harris. I keep
Will
calling
Harris.
him Will Smith. Will Harris. Man, I'm excited about this. About this signing. Hopefully after this conversation, I can be even more excited about the signing. But let's get right into Will Harris, and coming from Detroit for 4 years, and then signing with you all last year. What was the expectations of him coming into the year?
I don't think there were a ton of expectations for Will Harris kind of arriving in New Orleans. Like, I think when you look at, a 2-year, what was it, 2 years, $8 million that he signed, that's a pretty hefty payday considering he showed up on the Saints, signed a vet minimum deal. It was like 1 year, 1.25, something like that. So, you don't sign a guy to a contract like that and expect him to show up and be your week 1 starter, but that's what ended up happening. He came in, he worked, he lined up next to Tyrann Mathieu, and he just was the best option available, right? Like the Saints had a few younger options they could have gone with. They had drafted Jordan Howden the year before. He was a 5th-round pick. People kind of felt like he's on the right trajectory, but he got beat out. Like, we'll beat him out. And I think that's just Will. He's a hard worker. He's smart. His dad was a NFL wide receiver. I guess he was a star at Mississippi State back in the early 90s. He got drafted. I don't think he ever did a ton in the NFL, but that was, he grew up in a football family. And it's just, you make the NFL as a lowly recruited wide receiver by working hard. And that's kind of the message that will give you if you ever speak with him. That's just who he is. Like, he's a lunch pail kind of guy. He's going to come in. He's going to try to be a tone setter. And what stood out to me, and I think what drew a lot of Saints fans, he had a lot of fans here. Like, people wanted him back. They ended up signing Justin Reed. I think they wanted to make a bigger splash in the safety market than maybe
you got him
bringing Will back would have made, and they did do that with Justin Reed. But what I think endeared Will to a lot of Saints fans is he's just the type of safety that's going to get in there. He's a bigger guy. He's going to lay hits, and he had a monster hit on CeeDee Lamb to break up a pass in week 2. But the one that stands out to me, and what really I think is his bread and butter, is run support. And in week 10, if you want to go back and find it, I think it was like a 2nd and 1, and the Falcons, they hand the ball off to Bijan Robinson, kind of a wide zone, and he's got the whole field ahead of him. It's just Will kind of in a phone booth, and he just lays him out. I think they lose a yard. They don't convert. They punt, and it kind of was a tone setter for that game. Saints ended up winning that game. That was the game that basically ended the
wait to watch
season, because they just fell off a cliff. They were 6-3 at that point in control of the NFC South. The Saints kind of showed up and were the more physical team, and Will was a part of that. So I like Will a lot. I think he's going to be a good addition for y'all over there.
So I saw when we let's stay. I wasn't gonna go to one way, but let's go to, since we're already here, about him being a leader and a locker room guy. Just having that 1 year, being able to have that much good graces coming from his teammates when he's leaving. Like what type of leader and locker room guy is he?
He's an interesting guy, because I would say he's a quieter individual. Like, he's not loud.
Right.
He's not outspoken. I've talked to him a handful of times, and it's funny because you have Marshon over there, right? And Marshon was a guy who I would also describe as kind of quiet and keeps to himself. But every time I go try to talk to Marshon, I feel like I'm annoying him. Like, he just doesn't want to talk. He's just one of those people that just kind of doesn't really want to get out there. And in part because I know Marshon is always just on the verge of giving the other team bulletin board material. Like, he wants to talk trash, and I don't think he's capable of having an open conversation without it coming out of him. So he kind of just stays back. And it was always the Mike Evans part of the deal, right? Like, you knew anytime the Saints were playing the Bucs, we didn't hear from Marshon for like 2 weeks in advance, because he could not have a conversation without being like, F that guy. But anyway, but Will is, Will's not like that. Will, every time I go to talk to him, he's very open. Like, he's happy to talk to you. He's just not going to draw that attention to himself. And it's interesting because, you watch him on the field, and he's constantly talking. He's constantly communicating, to the point that Alontae Taylor last year at one point, I asked him about it after the game, because you can see Will constantly like tripping back and forth with his teammates. And he was joking that like one time in practice, he had to be like, okay, I get it. Like, let's
chill out.
Let's calm down. But then like in the course of a game, when the live bullets are flying, you need that communication. Like it seems like overkill in practice, but if you don't get that communication in the game, someone misses an assignment, it's a big play, right? So he's one of those guys that's always talking and communicating. And that's an important thing that I don't know if, you can watch film, you can watch tape, you can look at stats, you can look at anything. That communication is just kind of that intangible thing that you're not aware what's going on.
Yeah.
All gets missed. And it's like, okay, why was that a big play? Well, okay, the safety didn't communicate with the nickel corner, and suddenly someone's out of position and it's a big play, catch and run. So, to me, that's a big thing that Will brings that might go overlooked. Especially when you see him in the locker room and he just kind of keeps to himself in the corner, and then he's out in the field and he's this like big time communicator. So no, I think he is kind of a quiet leader. He's a lead through play kind of guy, but at the same time, he is big in that communication part of the game.
A lot of times we hear about guys being like film gurus and film guys and different things like that, always watching tapes and things like that. Is he one of those guys or no? I mean, and it's not like a big deal either way, but we're just trying to figure out who we have here.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough to say. Like I'm not in there watching film with him, so it's impossible for me to know how much he studies. I think when you are a player that is not, when you're a player that is where he's at in his career, which is kind of a journeyman who's trying to latch onto rosters, the only way to continue to do that is to be that type of guy. Yeah. And I never saw Will as a guy who was constantly out of position, who was getting beat by scheme, right? Because that's the difference, right? Like you're a talented player, you can win in situations, but if schematically you are behind and you are getting out coached by the other team because you're not prepared, then that's pretty easy to spot. And I never saw him be that guy. And, Tyrann Mathieu is probably at the peak of what a film studying player in the NFL expects. And so if you're in a locker room with him, he's not going to allow you to not be a film guy, right? There were plays throughout the season last year where, I think it was the Eagles game in week 3. Tyrann had an interception in the end zone, and I talked to him afterward, and it was like they schemed specifically to beat Tyrann Mathieu, and he still knew what they were doing and stepped in front of play for an interception. So, I mean, being in a position group with Tyrann, I think even that, I'm sure Will would say has been big for him in terms of his development. But I would think that he's going to come in and be kind of the adult in the room. He's a veteran player. The interesting thing is, I think he and Jeremy Chin are pretty similar.
Exactly.
They're going to be box safeties. So I do wonder if part of the reason you move on from Jeremy, and aside from the fact that he got paid $214, like I think he got
he got 2 at 16. Yep.
Yeah. So I mean, it's not a huge difference. It's something of a difference, but I wouldn't be surprised if one of the reasons you move on from Jeremy is something along those lines. Is he wasn't necessarily getting that part of the job. I'm just guessing. Because I don't see a huge difference from a skill set perspective between these two guys. So clearly there was a desire. I also don't see links from a coaching perspective. It's not like, oh, Will was on the same roster as Joe Witt back in whenever. So it's not like you're bringing a guy back. So like, I think that they wanted a guy like Jeremy Chin. So they went out and got Will Harris.
And I think, and Jeff, I think, and that's why when we signed him, I was like, okay, let me, and of course we've been dealing with free agency all week. Haven't really been able to do like a deep dive, but I did a little bit, right?
Yeah.
And I'm fine with Chin leaving now, right? Because he does the same things as Chin. It's not an upgrade. Somebody said it's like a side grade. I get it. But Will can do more. Like he can cover on the boundary, he can cover in the slot. He can do those things that Chin couldn't do. Chin is younger, right? So with Will Harris, like with Chin, if we re-sign Chin, I'm like, okay, we're not going to go safety early. But because we have Will Harris, I'm thinking 40-60 that we still may go safety early. So I'm okay with it. Just like you said, I think they're the same player. I think we got the same player. Can do a little bit more, but and I think and they both can tackle. But from what I'm saying so far from Will, man, he seeks out contact.
Yeah, and I think in the games I watched of the Commanders, setting the edge against the run seemed to be an issue throughout the course of the season, right? And I think that's where I would put Will's strength at. And I'm interested to see if they, because what I would say for Will is, he tackles well. He's not afraid of contact. He's going to get up there. He's going to stick his nose in. He's looking for big hits. And I saw people, I was on Washington radio station. I can't recall what it was yesterday. And I mentioned that and they tweeted it. And then a lot of people like, oh, that's a problem. Like big hits in today's NFL, he's going to just be a penalty magnet. Well, he only had one penalty all last season. And I would argue it was a weak penalty. It was on David Njoku against the Browns. And it was like, it got called because he dropped the ball and Will was already halfway into a hit. And so it became a defenseless receiver. And it's like, it's David Njoku. He's a giant. Like you have to hit that guy or it's not going to work. So even that penalty was like, it's not really a big penalty. In my opinion, it was just a bad call. So, he hasn't been a penalty guy. And I think there's a talent there of being able to lay big hits, but doing it clean and not getting penalized constantly. And that's, again, that's not an easy thing to do. But I do think that he has versatility that probably the Saints didn't get to because they were dealing with so many injuries. They lost both outside corners. So their nickel corner ended up having to be somebody else and shipped outside. And so I think you just ended up in a situation where you had to play Will Harris as kind of a single high cover safety more often than you wanted to. And you didn't always get to what they did best. And when they were able to get him up toward the line and be more of that kind of small bodied linebacker that I think every NFL team is looking for right now, he's at his best. So no, I mean, I like what the Commanders have done. And I think part of the reason, could be for Chin kind of priced himself out of what they were willing to pay, knowing that the Commanders were going to be just massively aggressive in this free agent class. I mean, every time I look up from a trade perspective, from a signing perspective, it's always the Commanders do this, the Commanders do that. So they are probably kind of trying to, I think a lot of teams will try to save some money at the safety position, knowing that you can get a little cheaper. The Saints have been a team that's done that. They've let players walk on free agent contracts and then bring in veterans like Will Harris, like Malcolm Jenkins, like Tyrann Mathieu. So, I think that's not uncommon for teams to say, okay, if you want to go get that big contract, you can go get it. We're going to find a replacement at a much more reasonable number. And that's what Will is.
And give me the same production.
Right.
Or try to get to that same production. And we talked about where he can play around the defense, being versatile. But how is his coverage at those positions? Cornerback, slot, safety. How is his coverage?
Yeah, I haven't seen him play outside. I don't know if he's done that previously with the Lions. I think maybe he has a little bit. I don't want to get Will isolated in coverage a ton. And one thing the Saints did a lot of is kind of roving safety. So it was tough. Like you would look and see like, okay, where is he lining up pre-snap? And then you would look post-snap and he would be like, oh, he's blitzing. But you would think, he's going to be the single high safety and it's not. You roll into a different coverage. And the Saints, Tyrann Mathieu is the type of player that when you play next to him, you do want to do that a lot more because he's just so good at kind of finding a spot on the field and you need to allow him to rove. And so Will's job was to play off of him. I don't think if you want Will at his best, you're going to isolate him in coverage, right? Like you're going to ask him to run with a wide receiver over the middle of the field. I just think that's not playing to his strengths. He's athletic, but he's not that athletic. I think he's more of a box safety. It's funny because I go to like a Landon Collins and I see that player similar, maybe not as athletic as Landon, but do a lot of the same things where when you had Landon in the box, and I don't think
he was great.
He played in Washington.
Like it took him a year to realize that he needs to be in the box.
Right. And I remember I grew up watching the Giants. So I watched Landon Young as a younger player. And then obviously he went to Washington. But, that's like when you had Landon playing to his strengths, he was an all-pro safety. When you got him outside
that last year, that last 6-7 games, he finally was like, all right, fine, I'll do it. Then they created this whole what they call a big nickel thing for him to make him feel good, I guess. But he was very, very good at that type of role.
Yeah, and that's kind of how I look at Will. Is like when you have Will playing to his strengths, he can be kind of a top end box safety. When you try to do little more out of him than makes sense, then you get into trouble. This is just a random Landon Young story. One of the funniest stories I ever read about Landon Young is he lost a bunch of weight. I think it was from like year 3 to year 4 with the Giants. And they asked him, how'd you do that? And he was like, well, previously I'd been going home and eating an entire like case of Oreos every day. And I stopped doing that and I lost a bunch of weight. And I just think it's funny. Like you look at these players like they're like well-oiled machines, but then some of these guys go home and eat like 40 Oreos after practice, and they're like, I can't. I know. I keep coming in overweight. I don't get it. Anyway.
That's crazy. So the injury, I think I read it was a hamstring, but it seemed like he came back and then he left again. Was that the same injury or was it something different?
So yeah, he had a hamstring injury in it was the Monday night game against the Chiefs. I think it was week 5, and it was a pretty significant hamstring injury. He was in a lot of pain. He got carted off the field, went on injured reserve. He came back. I think it took him a couple weeks to kind of get his legs under him. I don't think it was kind of a recurring hamstring injury, and I'm sure that after dealing with Marshon this past season, hamstring injuries kind of there's certain injuries that feel contagious. Even though it doesn't make any sense, you're like, oh, okay, we have contagious hamstring injuries. I don't think that was really the case. It was, Marshon's injury was more nagging. This was more of just a very significant soft tissue injury that he had to deal with. The Saints in general have been terrible at avoiding soft tissue injuries for whatever that is. And, they brought in a new pro performance director on Kellen Moore's staff, so they're hoping that they could figure some things out.
They brought him in this year.
I'm
recently?
sorry.
They brought him in recently. The new guy?
They brought Ted Rath in from the Eagles this year to kind of change things up. So I don't think that the hamstring injury has been something like, it wasn't like, oh, he kind of dealt with hamstring injuries. He was on the injury report every week, blah, blah, blah. It's kind of a one-off. And he was playing, I would argue, his best football toward the end of the season after coming back from that. So, the funny thing about Will is, we didn't know until week 1 that he was going to be the starter. And so I'm a sideline reporter, and one of the things I'm talking about is like, hey, after the first play of the game, I'm going to be like, so, just so you know, Will Harris is the starting safety, because this is radio, so people aren't watching it. So we have to kind of explain that to him. And I was like getting ready, and I was like, hey, I have a note after the first play on defense. I want to talk about Will Harris. And wouldn't you know it, the first play of the first game of the season, Will Harris gets an interception. So I wasn't even able to say that note prior to him making a play. But no, I think, he's just a player that's going to show up. And whether he's kind of the full-time safety, or if he has kind of a bit role as a sub package guy, I think he has a role with the roster.
Yeah. I can't wait for that. So I mean, you talked a lot about him stopping the run, and it looks like that's where his strengths at. And I mean, you said setting the edge, like that's very foreign to us. That's something we just could not do. We can't do it with little people, we can't do it with big people. So I mean, because I saw, just looking at like PFF, and I think another one where he lined up over 100 times on the D line. So do they use him a lot to like blitz? I guess he's there for run support also. Like, how is he actually used when he's up around the line of scrimmage?
Yeah, so the Saints run a 4-3, or they did run a 4-3. They're actually changing to some form of a 3-4 on a Brandon Staley this year. But yeah, so like he would be the guy that you would send up there as kind of the fifth guy off the edge. Sometimes he would blitz, sometimes he would drop out. They used him in run support a good bit. Like he's a strong tackler, and the Saints, one of the Saints' problems last year was stopping the run, and especially on early downs. And, over the course of time, they tried to solve that problem with bodies, right? So they would just send bodies at the problem. I wouldn't say blitzing is his best strength. I don't know if he made a huge impact as a blitzer. They preferred to send Alontae Taylor when he was playing the slot, and he was good in that role. And that didn't really pan out. I don't know if he has the kind of bend that you need as a blitzer to kind of get around the corner, to time it up the middle. So I'd have to go back and look at the numbers to see how many times they sent him on a blitz. I don't think he had a quarterback hit. But so, yeah, I think he's a guy who's going to play close to the line, but I don't think he's going to be that kind of, dagger blitz guy on third downs like you'll see sometimes, because I just don't think he's that type of athlete. But no, I mean, he was a guy that they played close to the line of scrimmage quite a bit.
I got two more questions, and the second question is actually based off of the answer to the first one.
All right.
And this is past Will Harris. Thank you so much. I am still excited about Will Harris. What's your take on Marshon Lattimore?
Oh, Marshon. My take on Marshon Lattimore is that he is one of the top press man cover corners in the NFL, and I think he still is that. you're going to get penalties when you play press man because you're going to be physical, and you're constantly lining up. Like, you're asking him to go cover. Like, you're not just sending him out there and saying, go cover whoever's out there. You're asking him to go out there and cover A.J. Brown, Mike Evans, DK Metcalf, guys who are going to try to punch you in the mouth and then get open. And what his greatest ability is to get punched in the mouth and punch back and frustrate that guy to the point that, he's completely off of his game. We haven't seen him do that in the last few years. Like, I remember they went out to Seattle and played the Seahawks. I think it was 2021 maybe. It was Jameis Winston season. And one of the first plays of the game was, like an 88-yard DK Metcalf touchdown where, they were physical. It was raining. Marshon's cleat, he blew a tire and he went down, and it was like an 88-yard touchdown. And you're like, oh, he's getting burned. Well, I think if you go back and look at the box score from that game, DK Metcalf finished with like 3 catches for 92 yards. Like, he didn't do anything else the rest of the game. And that's Marshon in a nutshell. Like, he could get beat, but he's gonna, like, when he's in that matchup that he can sink his teeth into, and like, it's like, I hate this guy, I'm gonna beat this guy. He's one of the best corners in the NFL. He's not always like that, and that's what drove me insane. Of like, like, you match up with the Giants, and it's like, oh yeah, go cover John Ross, and it's like, well, you can't cover John Ross. Like, what's going on? But then you get him in a matchup with Mike Evans, and he'll lock him down. So, I think that you didn't necessarily see the Marshon that hopefully you'll see this next season. I wouldn't overreact to what you saw in the playoffs, because I think you had a scenario like that. That hamstring injury was very real. And what I saw in the playoffs was a guy playing through a hamstring injury because he wanted to be on the field, and it was a playoff game. And he wanted to show that commitment. And he was getting frustrated because he was unable to play at the level that you need to play to get locked up with A.J. Brown one-on-one constantly and win. And, you saw him kind of try to do the stuff that, you get in the guy's head. After that touchdown, and it was funny because I know exactly what Marshon was doing there, which is, I want to punch this guy in the face, and the only time I can punch this guy in the face and not have it be a 15-yard penalty is on an extra point, right, or wherever it was after a touchdown. So he goes and does that there, and the funny thing is, it actually saved y'all a point because they went for 2 and didn't get it. Yeah. So 3D chess, right? But it's funny because if you do that in the field of play, that's 15-yard penalty. It changes the drive. You do that on a play where they already scored a touchdown. The penalty.
He's smart enough to know that.
Right. No, he is smart enough to know that. He's a smart guy. And you don't really hear him talk a lot, so you don't get that. But I 100% knew exactly why he did it right then. And it was because he understood, like, when you can get away with that and when you can't. And, so I'm rooting for Marshon. I think he's going to come back and be a much better player than people. I think people saw him get on the field. You traded a bunch for him, and it was like, he's got to be a star right away. He didn't really deliver on that, and I'm sure there's a lot of frustration around that.
Yeah.
Anytime you add someone mid-season, you're going to get that kind of, probably unrealistic expectation of like, I have this image of this guy, and he's going to show up and be exactly that. And when he's not, he's a scrub. But I think hopefully he can be healthy. Hopefully he can get that hamstring sorted out over this offseason and come back, because I think he still has it in him over the course of the season.
Yeah, and thank you. Like, I'm one of the ones that kind of was fighting with Marshon and these commander streets about the hamstring. But I came to realize that as of right now, we have lost that trade. There's no doubt. I won't fuss with you about it. I won't debate with you about it. But I am looking forward to him getting healthy over the off season. But my second question to that is, if like about hamstrings or whatever, the soft tissue hamstrings, is it more about rest, or does he need to have some type of surgery? And you mentioned he hasn't done some of those things in a few years. Do you believe he can get to any type of form when it's top tier Marshon, top 5 cornerback in the league next year?
Yeah, I mean, I think he needs to stay healthy, and that's been the problem. It's not so much been when he's been on the field. It's been he's just constantly dealing with. It was funny because his first major injury came in 21 or 22. He was he kind of like came off his guy and was making a play on Tyler Lockett, and it was like a great defensive play, but he ended up getting kneed in the back, and he like bruised his spleen. It was a weird or kidney or something like that. It was like something that like it's just a freak injury. And I think that's where some of the discontentment with the Saints came in, because they felt like he took a little too long to get back. And, he was frustrated because he was like, I'm hurt, Then this offseason, you had a hip flexor issue. And then, this last two off seasons ago, there was a knee issue, and that's the problem for him is you're constantly dealing with one thing or another, and then your play suffers, and then you get hurt again, and so that's the thing. And I think a lot of Saints fans thought he was sandbagging. I think they thought like, oh, he just doesn't want to be here.
A lot of Commander fans they thought he was going to do the Devontae Adams thing.
Right, and no, it was a significant injury.
It was a serious injury. Yeah.
And I don't think it's a surgery thing. Because if he was a surgery thing, he would have had surgery. I think he needs to prepare correctly, and especially, I think some players when they get older, they don't necessarily flip that switch immediately. Like when you're 22, 23, your body is made of rubber, and you could basically do whatever you want, and it doesn't matter. As you get to your late 20s, early 30s, the guys who take care of their bodies the best are the guys who are still playing at a high level. Like a Demario Davis, he's basically a vampire. He's 36 years old, but it doesn't seem like his body is holding him back at all. And it's because he's a maniac when it comes to taking care of his body. And I think Marshon is one of those guys who hasn't necessarily made that adjustment the way he needs to. And so hopefully this kind of has been a wake-up call for him. I don't think the Saints medical staff has done him any favors. It's been an issue for years. So hopefully out in Washington, he can get the support he needs on that front. But the Saints are still paying Marshon. I mean, the Saints are on the hook for $31 million for Marshon Lattimore this season. So I don't know if
they owe him 31.
The way I would put it. Because there's still, like, one of the reasons they've had to operate the way they have to this offseason is because they have a huge dead cap hit from Mark. So if they nail that 3rd round pick, I'll say they won. At this point, I won't say they won.
That makes a great point. I didn't know they still owe him 31 million.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, like I just was kind of thinking about it, when you're just looking at what we know, right? Like at that point, what we knew, I think he did. I think he played AJ Brown excellent, right? And we went back and we watched the tape, we watched every snap in that, and we saw and it was reminiscent to the game that you talked about with DK, about the big play, it overrides all of the other little things that he does and that he prevented. So, but all in all, from that point to then, you look at back and say, all right, yeah, he didn't play well, blah blah blah. But that's just where I am right now. But looking forward, like I'm hoping that he definitely turns that around. So yeah, the soft tissue sucks. Thank you so much. Our beloved child. Thank you for the 3-year, $51 million you gave him. Shout out. I thought he was going to be like a Jadeveon Clowney and just do 1-year deals for the rest of his career. So thank you for that, Jeff. We appreciate it.
We're talking about Chase Young here?
Yeah.
Yeah, it is funny. Like the Commanders and the Saints have kind of just traded, but we also have the defensive tackle. I'm blanking on his name. Ridgeway.
Ridgeway. Yep.
Yeah,
Ridgeway
so it's kind of fun. Just trading places. Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining, Jeff. We appreciate it. Please drop your handles if anyone want to, ask any questions or anything of you. Please let us know how we can reach out.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm on Twitter at Jeff_Nowak. You tweeted the show, so if anyone wants to find it, you can find it there. It's pretty easy to spell, but some people get it wrong. I host a podcast called Inside Black and Gold. It's on our YouTube channel at WWL Sports, and obviously all the podcast feeds. You'll know about that. And then WWL.com is where I write all my stuff. I'm the Saints sideline reporter for the broadcast, so I get to hang out on the sidelines of NFL games, which is kind of fun. I'm never going to complain about that. But yeah, that's where you can find me.
Yep. Thank you so much, Jeff. Something else comes up, definitely will reach out to you to ask you about it. But thank you so much for joining us. We really, really appreciate your time because we know it's very valuable. So spending some of it with us, we absolutely appreciate it.
Yeah, it's not as valuable as
not that valuable.
But I do appreciate you having me on. I hope you have a good one, man.
All right, take care, buddy. All right, bye-bye. Oh man, that was good, y'all. That was good. How y'all feeling, man? I see y'all in there. I see Mitch, Kamish, D, Belante was in here, Cuddy, Kurt, that guy. D Brown, I see you in here. Who else in the building? Dave, I see you. C Henry in the building was good. Vito, I see you. Murray Blue was good. Hermit Raj might be your first time commenting. But appreciate you comment, man. Appreciate you subscribe. Appreciate it. Continue to comment more. Let me see what Mitch talking about. Injuries to be on depend on how committed the player is to getting healthy and to get back. Yeah, I think he can get healthy, man. And we learned a lot about Marshon in that little few minutes right there. I know I had another reporter on talking about Marshon a couple months ago, but he was kind of new there. But Jeff has been there a while, right? So I'm even more excited about what's the probability of what Marshon can be if he can get healthy. Only people that never played dismiss injuries. Yeah, it was pretty significant, man. Just like he said, I mean, he's been watching Marshon for a long time. And he said the playoffs, what he saw was Marshon playing through a hamstring injury. He said he's been watching Marshon a long time. I believe. What's up, Poster King? He needs to work on track mobility, coach. His chain might be off. Can't wait, man. So 3 hours. Yep. And we going live at 4:00. So sit around, sit tight. We going live at 4:00. Beginning of the league. Yeah, I believe too. Yep. Yeah, it was a lot mid-season, man. Playbook, all that stuff. But he has a whole off season now. We got ready to rock out. What's up, Cash? How you feeling, buddy? Cash will be on later today. Can't wait. So is Mitch. He could be on later tonight. Yeah, he knows what it takes to get 99% back. I mean, he might not get close to 99, but 90, I'll take it, man. Give me 90. Give me 90. Yeah, I mean, it depends how you look at it, Post. I know some other people said that. I'm just kind of looking at the assets we gave up, the play that we gave up for him, what we know right now, right? This might change come week 8. I'm like, oh yeah, we won this trade, or it's even. I'm looking at it from our perspective. I mean, Jeff looked at it from the Saints' perspective and said it depends what they do with the 3rd round pick, and then they also owe him $31 million. I didn't know that. I didn't even realize that. So. I didn't think we was going to extend them this offseason. I didn't think we were going to do that anyhow, but some people thought they was. But I absolutely don't believe we're going to extend them because I don't think he's going to be pressing for it because he's getting $31 million from the Saints. So we cool with that. Yeah, I hope man. I think he can get back there. I'm hoping he can get back there, and I also think he can get back there. CJ from Orlando. Yeah, man, we watched the tape back. He did really good on AJ the first game. That's what I forgot to ask. Why didn't you remind me, Cut? I meant to ask him about him and the Will Harris thing. Yeah, I'm definitely in Marshon corner for sure. I'm definitely in this corner. I'm definitely. You hit that like button, y'all. Hit that like button. Appreciate that, Herb. Appreciate that, bro. Cut, you gotta relax, bro. It's Cash. 90% of Marshon is better than 100% of our country. That's true. Crazy. Yeah, join the community, man. $2.99 for the first membership. We trying to eat. Yes, sir. It's just me, Oos. Good interview. Appreciate that. We're getting good players, and the second year guys going to ball out on defense too. We're going to be really, and we're going to start looking at that next week. We're going to put the roster together, look at the depth chart of the roster, to see what we have, some holes and different stuff like that. We're going to let this weekend play out, free agency. And then next week, we're going to start looking at these depth charts to see what we're working with, man. It did. Like he actually said they made a change and got a Philly guy this year. He said the medical staff was horrible dealing with soft tissue injuries. They were horrible dealing with soft tissue injuries to the point where they got fired. So there you go. I don't think we have lost the trade, but based on current play from Marshon, we are losing. Yeah, I think that's a better way to put it. I hope he can bounce back and give us a true number one corner. I mean, shoot, depending on what Mikey do, I know Cash you more Mikey back in the slot, but if he's not, if they don't bring in a boundary corner, man, Mikey, man, from his rookie season, I mean, and the thing about Mikey is where he started from, which was like supposed to play slot, to being forced to move out because he was just better. Like you put your best 11 out there, and the best 11 calls for Igbo to be at slot and him to be at boundary corner, right? From getting beat horribly in the Bengals game, welcome to the NFL moment. Like take all that in the from his starting point to all the way to him getting interceptions in the Lions game in the divisional round of the playoffs. Look at the progression. Look at the progression of that. I know a lot of y'all like them graphs and them bars. Like put something together and just look how it continued to rise. So you take all that information and you throw a full off season, like he worked with Darrell Green a little last year, but take a whole full off season. He's going to be working with Darrell Green. I'm sure he's going to be working with other players too. Learning the system, second year in the NFL and all this other good stuff. You know, looking at it high regards. Going into camp, probably knowing the position he's going to play. Man, you could have 2 CB1s on the field, bro. That's insane. How wild. Yeah, man, I saw that, man. I don't know, man. Sadiq Charles, man, we couldn't get nothing out of him. Yeah, he was balling, bro. Always been a 3-year plan. He's a football player. He's a football player. Love it. Yeah, man. Like I know we kind of forget about Quan because he's been here a couple years. I mean, he's been forced to play the positions he's been at. He's been forced to play free safety, man. But that kid coming out of Illinois, he was the best slot corner that year coming out of college. So you get your another safety, a true safety in here that's a more ball hawk type guy. This defense could be crazy. This defense could be insane, bro. Yeah, a lot of people's not that high on him. I think Cash was one of those. You know, he did some more film work, but I really like Quan. I think Quan is a really great box player. I think he plays the free safety as well as you possibly could. I think he's a very smart player. Let me say this before I say what I'm about to say. I just don't think he has that ball hawk IQ of a true ball hawk and free safety. I think he wants to hit. Right? I think he wants to hit. You know what I'm saying? So having him, because that's just what he's used to. So having him in the box, even at slot corner, strong safety, somewhere in there, I really think you can maximize him. Because as you can see, boy, he'll come up from that safety spot and lay the wood on the sidelines, bro. You know what I'm saying? So I think that's where he's where he's best at. What if they draft the ball and move Quan? Yeah, that's what we're talking about. Yeah, that's what we're talking about. Putting Quan in the slot. You get one of them guys. Yep. Get Watts. You don't like Malachi. I hope you did more film on him, Cuddy. I can't see how you don't like Malachi, man. The film is gorgeous. The film is beautiful. I like Watts too, man. I do. But don't be dogging my man Malachi just because you want Watts to be the number one. He came in during a very toxic time, which has led me to believe he was just another bad draft product. He played very well during the playoffs. Yeah, we talking about Quan. I was trolling you, bro. Stocks is a beat. Yeah, all right. Yeah, all right. Let me go pull these tweets up real quick. At this point, do you value more ball hawk guys or guys that can get in the box? I value one ball hawk, Mitch, and that's free safety. That's what I value. One ball hawk. That's the guy, the guy that's not supposed to let nobody get past him. I need him to have a radar on the football. I need him to be able to get sideline to sideline laterally, right? And diagonally. I don't need nobody to get behind him, right? I want the quarterback. I want that part of the opposing team's film review. Is the quarterback focusing on trying to fool the free safety? Trying to find ways to beat the free safety. That's what I want out of a free safety. That's what I want. Oh yeah, if Iman is there, man, you gotta take him at 29. You gotta take him at 29 if he's there. Yeah, I agree. I think Walsh is a better ball hawk for sure. I agree. Zippy, that's true, man. Like we gotta get an edge, man. Oh my gosh, we gotta get an edge, man. We gotta be an edge. I mean, Will Harris can do okay with run support, but we need an edge, man. You need an edge. Yeah, he is. I think he is, man. He'll be a dog, man, if we get that dude. My goodness. All right, man. About to get out of here. 4:00, y'all. 4:00. I'm gonna probably do the link in a couple hours, man. But 4:00. Continue to hit that like. I don't see no. Come on, hit that like button. Hit that like button. Hit that like button. Hit that like button for me. Hit that like button. Continue to comment, share, send the link, send the channel to some of your commander buddies. Please spread it out. Follow, share, all that good stuff. The community is there. You can join the community. Absolutely appreciate it. We ready to rock and roll, man. We're gonna be grinding hard this whole off season, man. We're gonna be grinding hard, man. Actually, for free agency this week, this is the 7th show since Monday. This is the 7th live stream. And a lot of y'all been here with me every single one of them. Appreciate y'all, man. Yes, sir. Let's rock and roll. Mitch says it's glitching. Okay, well, yeah, there you go. But look, man, appreciate y'all. Appreciate that correction, James. You got 30 of them. That'll work. We appreciate all you can do. What's up, Scott? Hey, shout out. This is the International Fan of the Year right here. Scott Hartley, the Commanders International Fan of the Year right here. Scott Hartley. He's going to be representing us in in Green Bay at the draft. So shout out to him. Scott Hartley, that's him right there if you all were ever wondering. I don't know, Scott. It depends, man. I guess Justin Simmons would love to have a safety in here. There's not too many free agents I'd be ecstatic about, man. It's not too many left out there. The draft is where I'm trying to get to. I appreciate that, James. Shout out to the pod. Yeah, James is there. But I don't think you're going to be able to get – I don't know, man. I don't know if we're going to be able to do 29 and 61 and get both of them dudes. Maybe Watts at 61 is possible. I don't think Paris is going to be there at 61. But let's let this free agency rock and roll through. Appreciate y'all, man. I'm about to get up out of here. I know your time is very valuable. And for you to spend it with me, I absolutely appreciate it. Remember, do it because you love it, not because it loves you. One beat, one sound, one heart, one love. 4:00. See y'all. Peace.